Los Angeles, a interdisciplinary podcast covering any topic that I can find a resource on, recorded right here in LA. I am your host, Alex, just another wannabe comedian who cannot stick to just one type of podcast. And today I have with me Mr. Tyler. Mr. Tyler, how's it going today?
Hello. I'm doing all right. I'm drinking, so I'm ready to go, buddy.
You're in the Los Angeles spirit. I appreciate that. And for those of you who are new to the podcast of Los Angeles, you may remember Tyler from my Christmas special. And although he is most known as a Christmas enthusiast and Christmas expert, I brought him on today because I really want to talk about fictional or dramatized versions of real stories in American television. And specifically, WeCrashed, Super Pumped, and the Dropout series. So Tyler, any quick intro you want to do before we dive into all these fun dramatizations of real stories?
No, so I love TV shows that already have a well-respected and great documentary already made about them that I have already seen, and watching the dramatic in the depiction of them. So I'm excited, especially with these three. And also for those who don't know me, I actually work in the tech industry, so I have a lot to relate to in this and these stories.
Yeah, dude. I also come from a tech background as well. And while I can't say I've been a part of anything as spectacular as Theranos, WeWork, or Uber, there's still some little things that are fun to kind of to pick apart. But that's kind of the thing that drove me to this. Is out of nowhere, seemingly, just in the past few months, we've gotten 3 dramatized television shows about crazy founders and their tech companies, and we're kind of lumping them together, even though they're very different companies and very different stories all over, which we'll get into. But this is probably going to be the part 1 of a 3-part podcast series with my pal Tyler. However, I think we're going to end up jumping back and forth between them. But today, why don't you introduce which show we're going to talk about today, Tyler?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the, I believe, Apple TV original.
Correct.
Right. WeCrashed, based on the story of WeWork and its founder, Adam Newman, and his wife, Rebecca Newman, played by Jared Leto. Jared Leto doesn't play the wife, opposed to popular belief. He plays Adam Newman. And Anne Hathaway plays his wife, Rebecca Newman, who are characters, to say the least.
Yeah, they're pretty much the main 2 leads of the show. Most of the other characters I don't even think they get billing in the theme song. But yeah, it's a series that was released in March 2022.
There's like a Full House theme song introducing all the characters, there is. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's the Uber one. It's based in San Fran. I'm not sure. Sorry.
The Uber one is Showtime, and the Theranos one is Hulu Disney. I don't know who technically is it, but apparently it's on Disney Plus too. I didn't know that. I watched it on Hulu.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know.
Disney Plus. All I know is, like, what was confusing is each of those stories have their own documentary on different or competing streaming services. So the WeWork documentary is on Hulu, but the TV show's on Apple TV, and the Theranos documentary is on HBO Max, but the TV show's on Hulu. And I think the Uber one is Amazon Prime, or like paid for on Amazon Prime, but that's on Showtime.
Yeah. Oh my God,
dude.
it's fun how much mileage we're getting out of all of these different stories, because they are all pretty wild. But the WeCrashed television series, which is on Apple TV Plus, debuted in March of 2022. Jared Leto, Anne Hathaway. That is based on a podcast series called WeCrashed. So we're reviewing a TV show based on a podcast on a podcast. That's how great we are.
I did a lot of research. I clearly did not know that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually want to ask you this question, and I'm going to tell you my answer first. But I want to know what drove you to watch this show, because this was the last one of these three that I did watch. Part of that was because I didn't have Apple TV Plus until I signed up for the trial just so I could watch this. But the reason I got into this show, and I honestly had no interest in it because I had done my own homework on Adam Newman. I kind of thought I knew the whole story for the most part. But I am a big fan of, have you ever heard of Scott Galloway?
No.
So he's an author and a podcaster, big in tech and business. He has like a blog that's great, and I listen to his podcast, Scott, the Professor G Show, and I've read a couple of his books. Pretty awesome guy. But I was listening to his podcast, and he's actually a character on this show, the WeCrashed show.
Oh, really?
Do you remember the bald guy that wrote the blog post in the show? Spoilers for WeCrashed, by the way, if anyone is.
No,
do you remember?
I actually no, because I watched the documentary also fairly like recently, like right after I watched the show, and I thought the blog post was done by um like a startup that was in one of the WeWorks, but it could have been a different blog post. I'm probably just confusing tech
So there's
stories.
a bald white guy that's only in 2 episodes of WeCrashed, and in one he's interviewing Adam Newman like on a founders night. I don't know if that actually happened, but then the
Mm-hmm.
other is when when all their documentation gets leaked because they're going to go public, right? Is that their SOC 2 report? What was the report that got
SOC 2 is
uh
like secure. It's the
what
ISO or
what it was?
something
I
it's
should
called.
know this. Yeah. Oh, and they came up with their fake EBITDA score, where they came up with
Yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
fake
Oh,
EBITDA,
that
like the
guy, that guy.
community-based
Yeah,
medicine.
yeah, yeah. The NYU
Yeah,
professor too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah. So he's an NYU
Yeah, yeah,
professor. So anyway,
yeah, yeah.
long way to say it is Scott Galloway. I'm listening to his podcast one day, and they bring on the actor that's playing Scott Galloway on this show, and they're talking about WeCrashed, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that actually might be kind of interesting to see this guy that I listen to all the time, or see an actor portray him. So that's why I got interested in it, and I threw it on, and I found myself just kind of enamored with how far um, Adam Newman, and I imagine he's much more charming in real life. Jared Leto plays him pretty creepily, but when I'm
I
watching the
mean,
show, I'm like, how did?
we can get to
Go
Jared
ahead.
Leto in a bit, but like I'm actually convinced now that Jared Leto is just not a good actor. Like he's
Oh,
actually okay. I'll back up. He's a good, all right. He's a serviceable actor when he's playing a character based on like real people that he can see and like interact with. He's not a good character or like talk to sources. He's not a good actor when it comes to like stuff that he has to like make up. Because in this, like he's a little
are you
weird.
referring to when he was the Joker in
And Morbius,
Suicide
dude,
Squad?
mainly those two, and also like any other fucking movie he's in, like he's
Yeah.
not good. like, like he's not even good in the music video for "The Kill" or whatever that song is. Like, dude, relax. But he's him and as Adam Newman, like it's a little bit exaggerated, but the dude Adam Newman is a fucking character, like in his own right. So like he's larger than life. He's a little bit so like I didn't think Jared Leto was that bad. I just thought like he couldn't do like an accent and like he didn't sound like he was from Israel or anything. Like he just
Well,
sounded like he was mimicking somebody.
apparently he's been praised for his Israeli accent. I don't know. It sounded weird to me. I've never heard Adam Newman talk.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard a few interviews with him. He doesn't sound as aggressive as like Jared Leto kind of does when he talks.
Yeah.
But yeah, what drew you to the show, Tyler?
Yeah. I I've actually worked in a WeWork for a short period of time before I watched the show. Also known about the WeWork stuff, but I also worked for a tech startup in quotes. There wasn't really a startup because they've raised a lot of money, and the culture was exactly the same. So I had a buddy that used to work with the same company. He's like, "Hey, have you checked out the show?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." And he's like, "It's literally the last company we worked at. Like drinking all the time, like the vision, like the all hands meetings are always about like cheering on the CEO when he walks onto the dais. And it's just absurd." I was like, "I gotta check this out." And then I just got enamored by it, and it was great. Um,
Yeah.
Also, I just love stuff based on a true story. So you mentioned you watched this show first, or I forget which one first, but I actually watched all three at the same time. So like I spent probably like 2 hours a week just watching all these shows. So I think the Theranos one was like 30-minute episodes, a little bit shorter than these, which actually was, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was 3 hours a week, but it's just something about like a person who like brings a company up, has a vision, and then gets a shit ton of money from investors. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, it reaffirms that they're the
Yeah.
shit. They can do whatever they want. And then they don't reinvest in the company or to make the right decisions or realize they're going down the wrong path. And it's just like a train wreck. And I don't know, just something really
Yeah.
interesting about that from just a character study of like, if you get all like, was it like, what was it like 45, 15 billion, whatever it was, evaluation,
47.
$47 billion
47. Yeah.
valuation. Like that's gonna go to his head and his like, I mean, we'll get into it, but like the whole concept of WeWork is just like renting out spaces. And it's just like their mission was to elevate the world's consciousness. And it's like, what the fuck does that even
Yeah.
mean? And how is this guy able to raise so much money? And how did no one catch on to it? So it's just
Yep.
it happens every day. And it's super interesting. And working in a tech company now, we're like going through Series B or what D, whatever, and just like growing. And I'm fortunate enough where I work now. It's like, oh, they're actually like seems like they're putting in the right place, but it's just like
You
I've
never
been in the
know.
situation where we had to raise a Series E, and like I don't think I've heard too many of those. Like this is a bad spot. So yeah, it's just super relatable as an
Yeah.
employee.
Oh, by the way, I want to go back to this. The S1 is the name of the document. It's an SEC filing used by companies
Okay.
going public that has kind of, you know, all of the information that's going to be made public when they go public, including their finances and their EBITDA and all that stuff. So that was the thing that kind of broke the whole news about the WeWork scandal, and I think they get into that well in the show. But I
Yeah.
just want to quickly introduce it. WeCrashed follows the true story of WeWork's rise and fall. It starts in the beginning with Jared Leto as kind of coming up in New York City, how he comes about to create the first shared workspace company that was worth $47 billion. And
Well,
go
to
ahead.
cut you off there, like I know you're introducing it, but like what I really liked about the show was to show like this guy is like what he called, I think he calls himself a serial entrepreneur,
Yeah,
but like his ideas before WeWork was like the baby pants with knee pads,
yeah,
like the
and the
toddlers that they crawl
collapsible
because they're like, just
heel
because they
for
can't speak,
women, the high
they
heel
don't
that you can.
doesn't mean they're in pain. It's like all these ideas are absurd.
Well, so yeah, I thought the WeWork show started off great. I really liked how they introduced Jared Leto as the serial entrepreneur. He brought up his really weird ideas, and that's kind of the thing I want to bring up. Basically, if I had to summarize the entire show, it's all WeWork did was continually raise money from investors that bought into this idea, and he was lucky enough to have access to a ton of really great funding. Part of that is he married Gwyneth Paltrow's cousin, who also had tons of money.
Yeah.
And he continually just raised all this money and, obfuscated what the actual finances of the organization were and was able to profit on the side of it, which they didn't really touch on in the show. And eventually, when people got to look into their finances, they realized what all of us were thinking. I mean, a shared co-working space is not a new idea by any
Yeah.
means. So it was ridiculous to believe that one could be such a great company on the outside just based on saying things like, "We're gonna like learn here, we're gonna live here, we're gonna
Love.
elevate." Yeah, exactly. So that's just kind of where the show goes, and I don't know. Overall, what did you think of the series itself?
I thought the show was great. I thought it was interesting in terms of like humanizing the characters. Like I never like obviously the characters are unlikable, but like when like you're kind of like, even though I know what happens, like I felt like sort of bad, but also like relieved that he was like at the end kicked out as CEO and whatnot, like overtaken, voted out by the board of investors and shareholders. It's just like I don't know. It's just I think they did a really. I think Anne Hathaway steals the show as the
Yep.
actress, right? For Rebecca Newman, because I think that's a very interesting role, and also like interesting about thing about WeWork is like she like his wife like inserted herself into the company, but never like had any impact, only detriment to it, and also like had like branching off so many ideas without like focusing on their core business. It was just like it was interesting. But like just to go off actors, like just the top three, like the guy who plays the Miguel, I forget his last name, but he's a co-founder of WeWork. Like whoever that person is in real life, Miguel, like I feel bad for the actor portraying him because he was like a ho hum like like doofus in the whole show. And I was like, he's just like, all right, I'm an architect, like whatever. Like Adam does everything, and then it's just I think that's probably how it went in real life, but it's just like not a great portrayal of him. The guy's definitely smart, but yeah,
Yeah, the co-founder's name is Miguel McKelvey, and
McKelvey, yeah.
he allegedly was not thrilled with how he was portrayed in the show. Because you're right,
He's
he
an idiot.
comes off as such a dweeb. It's so funny.
He's like, oh, what are we doing now?
Yeah, I can't
Oh man.
believe. I mean, I don't know how true, but like that opening, like kind of segment where he's like, every great company has a all-nighter before their big pitch meeting, and he goes to bed and it shows the two screens. Like one is Adam Newman just sleeping, and then the other is Miguel working his ass off on a pitch for a good
Yeah.
co-working space. And then the show really likes to kind of throw in your face that Adam Newman is just this like kind of fraud who just sells things really well and is all about
Well,
like believe and give more money and like don't take
well,
no for an answer.
I think like I could be completely wrong, and I remember looking this up after I watched the show and the documentary. But I think Adam Newman has found like another successful like investments and whatever. Like he's still like technically a billionaire. So I think like I wouldn't call him like a fraud. More so like he's not. He's more like he's not self-aware of his like shortcomings. Like
Well, and this is
yeah.
something the show didn't really explain because you're right. He is worth a ton of money. Apparently, as of 2022, he owns enough apartment buildings to be that are worth around like $1 billion. But what he was doing, which I can't believe. I mean, they say in the show the investors knew about it was like he would buy properties and then
Oh yeah.
force WeWork to buy them from him at huge markups that he was able to just put away the cash for. And then additionally, they barely touch on this as well. He trademarked the term "we" like personally, and then made WeWork so the investors spend $5.9 million to use it. Like that money he just took in to his own pocket. So like as CEO, he decided that this would be the name. And like, dude, I'm sure there's tons of CEOs and like shady business people that do things like this all the time. I'm not trying to act like he's any worse or better, but he was able to line his own pockets through the whole process
Yeah.
very carefully. And it's tough when so many people who took the job under the guise that, they were going to get all this stock, they were going to be rich, and that they were going to be a part of something great, kind of had their lives ruined. And he got to kind of walk out for tons and tons of money. And this show does very clearly state from the beginning they were losing north of what, like, they were losing like $90 million a day or something crazy.
Crazy like that, yeah. And what I find like interesting about the show is that like he and the I guess real life is like act like he had unlimited like deep pockets, right? So he was able to I think there's a scene in like episode like 5 or 4 or whatever where someone is trying to quit and then the guy doubles his like Adam doubles that dude's salary about like coming in late and then they have like a cocktail party like
Oh my
something
God.
crazy like that and it's just like yeah, why wouldn't you stay at that company? But like it's interesting like the company culture that he created was like which is one of the stupidest like anyone listening to this, if a company says work hard, play hard to you, run away because that's stupid. Work
That
hard and then like play hard on your own dime and do your own things. Cause it's like last company I worked at, fucking we would have work to 7 p like get in at 8:30, work to 7 p.m., go to an open bar. We call him number 2, the second employee ever hired, would drop the company card at the bar, we'll drink all night, wake up and do the same thing over and over again, and it just burns out. And you get caught in this routine of doing that type of stuff. And that's like just the vibe you get from how old WeWork was because they're still a company. And the show portrays that too with like the WeWork camp and all the parties they would have. And Adam sending emails at like 1 a.m. and whatnot, like crazy. It's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you feel like this experience maybe echoed some of your
Oh yeah.
experiences or things you might have heard in tech
Oh yeah,
companies.
dude. I remember one of our holiday parties was like we chartered a boat, a party boat, to go to Brooklyn to have a party. Then the party boat brought us back to the financial district, and I was like, "It's a subway ride. We could have just met there." It's like it's insane, dude. And but it's fun when you're in it, and then you realize like you're fucking exhausted every day. You're hungover for work every day. Your meetings back to back. You're working your ass off, and it's like, okay, what's happening here? And
Yeah.
then the CEO gets fired, and then you're like, okay, what's next?
Wow.
It's literally this, like, I relate so hard to this story. Like, I forget the was it the like the auditor or the guy, the I forget what like was it JP Morgan Chase, the investment firm that brought in that CEO character, or that I forget his name in the show, but like I
The
had
guy that
that.
gave him a personal loan.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and they brought in the guy that was like going through all the books, right?
Hmm.
And he was like critiquing everything. The British dude. I think he was British. He had an
Oh yeah.
accent
So he
that
doesn't
sounded
exist. I looked
proper.
him up. He doesn't exist in real
He
life.
doesn't exist. Yeah, okay. But like
Yeah.
yeah, but it's just the idea of like the thought of it all. And like I remember the day the CEO of my last company got fired for essentially partying and doing inappropriate stuff, and they lost confidence in him. Was like the whole investors were having the same exact speech that he gave to the company. And it was
Yeah.
just like, oh, okay, whatever. Um,
Yeah, the
yeah.
the freaking that scene kind of hits hard. There's one of the episodes for those who haven't seen it where it opens with like a young girl starting, and she thinks it's going to be all
Oh yeah.
fun, kind of in the beginning, and they hand her a laptop and a glass of champagne on her first day, and they have a
Yep.
thank God it's Monday party, and they all drink till like 3 in the morning, and they all hook up, and it's kind of weird and creepy, and you slowly watch her become quickly exhausted with this lifestyle that Adam Newman was perpetuating within WeWork. And, he had a lot of huge dreams associated with the company, but they really make it clear that one of his main priorities also was to kind of have an avenue to party and drink tequila and live like a rock star. He often says in the show, I don't want to be a billionaire, I want to be a trillionaire.
Yeah, it's yeah, the fuck closet, right? Wasn't that the
The
montage
fuck
of
closet,
like
yeah.
the day she comes in and then she's partying, having a great time. They do the Harlem Shake at a random time. And then it's a good montage to the like employees, like the idea of feeling trapped,
Mhm.
of like you're in a company, but it's also your social life. So you can't escape that company. And it's one of those things that's like I've done that for a while, and I was like hanging out with people that I would work with all the time, then realize like, wait, I'm kind of alienating some of my friends a little bit because I'm hanging out with people I see 5 days a week, which is, you can make friends at work and whatever, but like we work, or the show takes it to the next level. That's like, oh, we want people to be here, and like this is your life and all that stuff. So like it's crazy, stupid.
Yeah, it definitely gets into that for sure. So I actually want to ask you, what are like a few strengths you think of on the show, and then we'll get into some of the weaknesses because I want to point out that the show is actually not reviewed super well. It's considered the middle of the three,
Mm-hmm.
based on all the reviews I'm reading. A lot of people say it's pretty hollow, doesn't really add anything to the real story, and um, I will say, well, we'll get to weaknesses in a second, but on the strengths, I'm with you. I think Anne Hathaway does an incredible performance. One thing I really like is every now and then they do this thing really well in the show where like Jared Leto and Anne Hathaway come up with an idea that's kind of stupid, but they're so like
Into it.
elated by it, and the music they'll play
Yeah.
and the smiles on their faces, it'll be positioned as the ending of a rom-com or something so uplifting, and then you see the faces of people around them think that what the hell's wrong with you. One of the examples I remember is when they come up with a name WeWork, or when she decides to um, re- reassess herself as the chief operating officer. There's a couple other instances, or
Yeah.
like when they build the first one, and it's
Yeah.
so good.
Dude, it's like finding like your significant other who's also an echo chamber for your thoughts. They're literally the same person. And it's like that's what okay, so I would recommend folks to like I think I watched the documentary before I watched this show. I watched it like 2 years ago and the show came out and or a year ago, whatever it was. And I think I think it's purposeful in the idea that it focuses on the characters, the two main characters, Anne Hathaway and Jared Leto, not so much on the business side of things because there's so much out there already about the business. So I think it was intentional, and I think the craziness of it all is just like you're trying to get into this guy's brain who has convinced himself and convinced thousands. I think like was they had like I don't know how many employees they have. They have like I don't know. They're growing rapidly, so he's like on top of the world. So he has like a god complex about him, and you're seeing that unfold. So I thought that was like really interesting and different and different kind of spin on the story, rather than talking about like how they're like promoting themselves as a tech company, but they're really a real estate company. They're stretching themselves thin. They have no business plan. They're just poorly run. You know, that's kind of dry, which I thought was a good choice,
So
personally.
did you like the documentary a little better, or do you just think it enhanced your ability to enjoy this show?
That's a good question. The documentary is great because it gives like really like real life examples of employees that work there. I don't think this aspect was touched on the show. I can't remember, but like the idea, like so Adam came up with the idea of We Live, which is essentially a college dormitory, right? It might have touched
Yeah,
upon
you're
it.
right. They don't really get into that, but that was part of his like three-prong attack. We
Yeah,
live, we learn, we work.
yeah, so they interview a guy who works at WeWork, lives in the We Live. And he tells a story about how he would like invite his friends over for drinks or something. And like he said, like collectively, everyone who invited an outsider, they would call him, in, they would only show up once because they were like, this is too fucking weird.
Yeah. It's a
And
commune. It's
it's a
not.
commune. And the documentary also shows like there's a guy talking who's I think he's a designer. So he designs all the helps with the like how the layouts are done. Which although I've been in WeWorks, they're great. I fucking like I've
I
worked
do
in
really
one
like
for a
them. I
while. Like
do.
it's a
Yeah.
great idea. And I think the business is around for a reason because whatever, it's a good business model and they've doing it the best probably. But there's a guy that like was like, I don't like to drink, party, but I'm brought to this camp, the summer camp, where it's mandatory, where everyone's getting shit faced, drinking, and have to sit in the mud for 3 days straight, listen to Adam speak on a stage and his wife, and it's like very interesting. Yeah, I would say like the pair together enhances the experience. I don't know if one's better. Like I always love watching Jared Leto because I think he's just whatever he's not good at what he's doing, but you can't stop watching. You know, it's like a car crash. Can't keep your eyes away from it. It's just like one of those things. He's just like the choices he makes. It's just kind of like I don't
So
know.
I'm getting mixed signals. Do you like his performance in this, or do you not?
I'm confusing myself. I do and I don't,
Because all right, well,
but
like,
I
give me
also
a
don't
performance you
like
hate.
but also I've seen Adam Newman for
Right.
stuff and I don't like what he does. And I'm like, so is he doing a great job or is he overacting? It's like conflicted because I don't know what's the truth and what's like should be. I don't know. It could just be Jared Leto going for it and it just all of a sudden like works because the guy he's basing it off of is so eccentric, like sort of like Dallas Buyers Club. Like he plays
Mhm.
that uh I guess I don't know what the politically correct term is, but like the male prostitute that dresses up like a woman, I think,
Mhm.
has HIV. Like clearly that's like just like kind of like going for it. You gotta go all in for it. And he
Right.
does that every role he does. Like give him credit. Like he goes for it. It's not great. Like he'll never be a scientist in a movie. Like I know he's a scientist or
Hey,
a
Dr.
doctor.
Michael Morbius, bro. That's a scientist.
Yeah, but he's also a fucking vampire, dude. He's never gonna be like the friend. Like he's never anybody's friends in it.
Yeah, Jared Leto's
Yeah.
confusing. I don't know. It's like he's so good in roles where the focus of the movie isn't on him. Like I just watched American Psycho the other day and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, Leto really blends into this movie. I don't really think about him much because it's Christian Bale's movie." But
Yeah.
then, I throw on Suicide Squad and every scene he's in is like, oh, it's the Joker. And I'm like, all right, this is way too much.
That's why Brad Pitt is such a great actor. He's a character actor, if you think of it. He plays um like he can be a leading man, but he also plays these quirky side characters that aren't the main characters. Like in Burn After Reading,
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like he does these like his even that new movie coming out, Bullet Train, like it seems like a kind of crazy movie. He's going for it, but it's never like insane levels where Jared Leto is just like the Joker sending shit to Margot Robbie and shit like that. Like I don't know.
Yeah. acting really crazy is Leto's best idea. And then oh my god, I think I really soured on Leto when they made that really bad HBO Max movie with him, Rami Malek, and Denzel, The Little Things.
Oh
I think it's called.
you made me watch that.
Oh, dude, that movie's so fucking bad. I don't even want to get into it. I'm gonna fall asleep. That movie.
No, let's not get into it.
Yeah.
It's
Anyway.
I can do a whole podcast on that. That movie's hilariously bad.
But you mentioned good actors, and I have to give it up. Like Anne Hathaway just nails the heady universe chick who acts like she's above everything, but then they show her little petty jealousies with her friend.
Yeah.
And my favorite scene in probably the whole series is her wedding. And the little girl comes up and asks, "Is Gwen coming?" Because like everyone wants to know where Gwyneth Paltrow is, and she gets asked like 50 times, and she just basically goes, "No," like to like a little girl, and it's so good because you can just see how much it bothers her.
Yeah, she's a interesting character because she's comes from wealth. Like they set that up with her father, who I don't know much about that true story or anything, but I don't know, some financial crimes or something, whatever.
I think it's fairly true.
Yeah. But what's interesting about her is like she like it's well actually with both like the Adam Newman and Rebecca Newman characters, like they're both genuine in their efforts, but they're also insane. They're out of their mind. So like I like when like Anne Hathaway's trying to find her passion and can't put her finger on it. Like she makes that movie and she acts for she made a movie. That's the documentary blurring my brain. But she like wrote a play or took acting classes and then just left because she was like, oh, whatever, like she's kind of cutting out, and then she's going off the coattails of like taking responsibility of WeWork and the success that it has and whatnot. Like it's interesting because she's like a conflicted character that is not grounded, where she expects herself to be like something worth more than she actually is. Where she's like she should be like Gwyneth Paltrow, but she's not. But she doesn't understand that she's not, so she never goes. So she goes into like education with no background, trying to teach these kids, and she has no sympathy, like almost like a sociopath.
She's
like,
delusional. Yeah, absolutely.
Delusional. That's the right word for it.
And they both are, and I think they show that so well. And it's like I'm like giving them credit for just saying things that actually happened. That's kind of ridiculous to be like the show is good because it showed this thing that actually happened. But when you have that whole arc where Jared Leto or Adam Newman wants money from an investor like SoftBank, so he decides to say that he's a software as a service, that WeWork is a technology company when there's nothing like, it's as funny as when Uber did it to bypass city regulations. They said, oh, we're not a ride sharing company.
At least Uber had an app.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess WeWork had an app.
Oh, yeah, WeWork does have an app, but that was fucking hilarious to me, is him trying to justify that they were a tech company because he knew they could line their pockets a lot deeper if they could be classified as such. But I want to get back onto I want to get on the cons because I also want to have time to talk about the things that are and aren't true. Yeah. What didn't you like about the show, Tyler?
I thought it was a little too long. Like I feel like they put a lot of fluff into it. I don't get these streaming shows that like feel like they have to make like 8 episodes or whatever how long this was, but like you can tell this story like doesn't have to be a movie, but it can be like a 2-part movie. Like be a little more succinct. I didn't like the portrayal of Miguel as this doofus architect.
You're really rooting for that guy, huh?
Well, like I actually like looked into him a little bit, and like the guy worked at WeWork for another like 2 years after, or a year after Adam Newman left, and then he left, and like is still like promoting that. Like he seemed like genuine, but in the show it seemed like he was just, and this could be real, but like in the show he was just like a background character, just like hanging out and Adam was taking the stage, which is probably how it was in real life. But and him doing all the work, but they didn't really give him any like credit in the show of like coming up with helping with this idea and
So
like
you think it's a
buying
little
in.
too focused on Rebecca
Yeah,
and Adam? Okay.
yeah. Like I like that part. I like the character study of the two of the couple. Like I think that's interesting. Like I think it's intentional. Um, I also think they could have brought up more like substantial characters besides. There's really no other role like reoccurring characters for like the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's that Rebecca's friend that comes in who plays what's that Ugly Betty. Ugly Betty comes in
Yeah,
as this like entrepreneur or something.
yeah, her name is America Ferrera, the actress, and she
Okay.
plays Alicia Kennedy, who also did not exist.
Yeah. So it's like they don't have like every tech company and startup has like, at least from my backgrounds, like they call like the first 5 employees like employee 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, that's number 2 or whatever. They don't really set a groundwork. It's all like in the show, it's all about Adam, but there's other people that were involved and they don't do a good job of showing like, and this could be realistic of like their discovery of how much of a shit show this has become. They're all blindly like following it. That could be, but they don't do a good job showing that. I think it's just kind of like it's really centered around Jared Leto and
No, I think you're making a really good point because if anyone's interested, the 2 of the 3 stories that are the worst reviewed are WeCrashed and Super Pumped, and I would say Super Pumped has the same thing. It's really all about Travis Kalanick. There's not really much development for any of the other characters. It's hard to remember any of the other ones' names. But I would say the Theranos one does a really good job of you get
yeah,
to meet her family, her neighbor, you get to meet her investors, some of the employees that work for her, and you
mm-hmm.
you 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 learn more about their stories. It's not all about Elizabeth Holmes. So that's probably it. And I think part of it is like, I mean, we're watching like a story of insufferable, know-it-all, arrogant, like
Yeah,
people out of touch with the world. It's not easy to watch. It's not fun.
yeah.
So I can
But
see why
there's a
you get that
scene.
feeling.
There's a scene in We Crash where there's a group at Adam Newman's house who you all recognize, and you question, wait, are they like friends with him?
That scene
Like
is so
what?
weird.
Right? It's like why are they there? Like
Yeah.
they never established like how close they are.
Yeah, one
Like
girl's main arc is that she bought a $25,000 purse when they were gonna go public because she thought she'd
yeah,
be
and that's
rich.
the same girl at the beginning,
Yeah,
the fuck closet girl, or maybe
yeah.
she wasn't the one fucking in the closet,
I
but
think
it's
she
just
was.
yeah, I think she was, and it's like they don't really do a great job by like establishing like people's like realization because that definitely was happening. Like people definitely getting tired. There was no hostility towards Adam,
Mhm.
which like in reality, like that definitely would have happened. Like employees would have started raising
Yeah,
like they did in the show, but like early on the summer camp episode. But yeah, I thought that was poor, and I just think it just was kind of stretched a little bit.
yeah,
And also like the investors. I didn't
yeah.
I guess like no one would admit that they were blindly investing into like something that would fail. Like they're just hoping like throwing money at a fire or whatever. But I don't know. How
Yeah,
about you? What are your thoughts? What are your weak points?
dude, I'm kind of with you. I actually found of the 3 shows, this one to be the most boring at parts. I would just get
Yeah,
really bored in some episodes. There's so much meat to this story, and I think if you really focus in on how much of this was like fraud, and it's tough to really get invested in the stakes when they're getting into their business meetings because at the end of the day, WeWorks are still around. Adam Newman's still rich. No one really got to pay for their crimes. It's like
right.
kind of frustrating in that regard to just watch it continually snowball. But on the other hand, I kind of look at it similar to like Uber because Adam Newman did all these insane things. I now have the opportunity as a consumer to go work at a cool office for $30 a day or
Yeah.
whatever.
I mean, the company's downfall was his hyper growth. And that seemed like that
Absolutely.
was like spearheaded by Adam only. Like they
Mm-hmm.
do a good job sometimes showing like people's concerns towards it, right? Of
Right.
being like, um, was it Miguel or someone saying that we can't do this in this year, and he's like, "Oh, we can do anything. We can change the world." And like, like some crazy shit. And
Yeah.
it's actually like a point I wanted to bring up, like just from my experience of like working at a couple tech companies. Is like there's a lot of temporary. Like what happens is there's a lot of temporary fixes that become permanent.
Yeah.
And you see that like that's probably what happened here. I'm not a fucking expert, but like you do something, you fix the situation, and then you keep doing that same thing, but you're not fixing the root cause of the issue, and then it snowballs into something bigger down the line.
Yeah.
And it seemed like in the show and then like the documentary, like there's a lot of things like, oh, we'll kick the can down the road, and then it got too big to like
Yeah.
manage.
And I think maybe my other issues, and I think absolutely we kind of see that take place over the course of it, and that's useful. You're able to focus the narrative a little bit more, but just the main problem with these dramatic retellings of real stories, especially ones so recent. Like this isn't something that happened 40 years ago. This happened
Yeah.
like 5 years ago, as recent as
Yeah.
that. Um, but I just recently watched Bohemian Rhapsody for the first time. Like great movie, right?
Oh,
A lot of
okay.
it's not a lot of it's not true about Queen, but it's a dramatic retelling.
Yeah.
And I liked it. It's a great movie. And I asked someone what they didn't like about it, and their point rang really true to me. They said, "You know how that end scene where they do the Live Aid concert is incredible and their energy is really great and it's like perfectly acted and it really like, almost brings a tear to your eye how
Yeah.
amazing it is." It's like, why don't you just go watch the concert? Like the Live Aid show is right there on YouTube. You can go see it if you want. Like, and that's kind of the feeling I have with these things, is that these shows aren't really necessary. Um, I have a good time kind of like
Yeah.
watching it and feeling like I'm a part of it because I watched the documentary or I read the book in the case of Uber and Theranos. Um, but at the end of the day, I'm not really getting anything out of it. It's just, it's
Yeah.
extra lore at the end of the day for a real thing that
Yeah.
ruined a ton of people's lives.
Yeah, what's interesting, like to that point, is I would disagree with like the Bohemian Rhapsody reference, but because I think the recreating it is like was awesome. It made a lot of people
Mhm.
like revisit Queen for that moment. But like there's like the show, like are they adding more to the actual story? Which
So I have a
yeah.
list of the things that they changed if you want me to go through of it.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm curious. I don't know this.
Okay. So one of the first things, which I guess I was a little interested in, well, so the stuff about the S1 and dealing with SoftBank, from what I can tell, a lot of this show, especially compared to the Theranos and the Uber one, is pretty true. All that stuff with the S1, all that like weird community-based EBITDA crap.
To cut you
Um,
off, I watched
Go
a
ahead.
documentary like after we texted about this a few days ago. I watched it again, and like that was actually the climatic like point of the show of the
Mhm.
movie of like people texting each other on vacation that were like in the like finance blogging industry or whatever. Like, can you believe they're doing this? They're killing their
Yeah.
company. So like that shit is like that was true that he just rewrote it and it's just like a fucking manifesto essentially, but it's not an S1.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I actually have, well, I had Scott Galloway's or I have Scott Galloway's we what the fuck article, we WTF up. So this was the thing that took him down, and he does this really great thing where he puts charts in it, and he has lists of the mentions of the founder slash CEO and S1 filings for some of the bigger companies that went public.
Mhm.
So the name of the founder of Slack is Stewart, and in his S1 filing, Stewart is mentioned 18 times. For Uber, Dara, because this is after Travis Kalanick went over, Dara's name is mentioned 29 times. For Zoom, Eric's name is mentioned 38 times. So, Zoom, Uber, Slack, pretty big tech companies that went public pretty recently. For WeWork, Adam's name is mentioned 169 times across the S1 filings.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
I,
Um, yeah, also I just like on my second monitor, just pull up Scott Galloway. You should watch it. If you haven't seen the documentary, he's really in it a lot and
oh, he is?
he like breaks down exactly what you're talking about, but like with graphs and shit. It's yeah, it's great. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm plugging him hard. We might as well talk about him. I'll do a Scott Galloway appreciation podcast if I have to. Definitely recommend him to all my listeners. But so some of the few changes, they definitely streamlined things. So Adam and Miguel met at a party, a work party, some kind of venture capitalist meeting. I think they said they were in class together in
Yeah,
the show.
he was presenting, right? Yeah.
Right. McKelvey reached out to Newman afterward to tell him about it. So in real life, they happen to work in the same buildings, and they met each other at a office party. So they kind of bonded over community-based upbringings, because they did mention how
They both were raised in communes.
Yep. So that's how they met. And then Adam met Rebecca through a friend. So there wasn't that weird thing where she's at a party, he threw on a roof trying to make money. They did have a blind date, and it sounds like it went pretty similar to how it did on the show, where he showed up late and tried to get her to pay for the wine.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was
That's
wacky. They did skip over and probably didn't have the rights to use his likeness. They were really close with Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about that. I don't remember them referencing, like, because his Ashton Kutcher's like pitch for WeWork helped them buy some time when
the
Mossy,
SoftBank
fell through. So like that was interesting. That wasn't included in the show.
Yeah, so that was again, and that's kind of one of the cool elements that I was kind of made aware of, is that Adam Newman was this perfect storm of opportunity because of his connections in Hollywood, his connections to Rebecca Newman or Rebecca Paltrow and Gwyneth Paltrow and all that. So they just had so much at their disposal. Another change, I think you knew about this. So summer camp was an annual mandatory company get together. Like they had to do it. So it happened several times. And although in the show,
this is one episode, right?
Yeah, in the show, Rebecca goes on stage and says a big part of being a woman is to help men. In the summer camp, that actually happened in some interview, I think, at a different time. So that was a little bit of a change, but they did actually have that summer camp multiple locations through multiple years, which is just nuts. Like you mentioned in the documentary, they went over that. And the guy was like, I don't want to do that. And I would also not want to do that if my company tried to do something like that.
I'm actually going to one in September for my company, but it's not as crazy. Yeah, Frankfurt, Germany.
That's awesome.
The company's based out of Germany, so it's a little different.
Okay, yeah. So all right, now we're into like kind of the big changes. So the Alicia Kennedy and Cameron Lautner, so the investor guy and then the best friend girl, are not real.
Okay.
So
so is the investor like the guy from like when Jared Leto did the speech at like Chase and he pointed to the building? Like owned that, right? So that guy wasn't a real person. He's just like a sum of all the share of the investors, probably.
The British guy, right? The one that like
yeah. So he wasn't. So from the show, he wasn't an investor, but he was like working with the bald guy. I think they might have been both bald, but the non-British bald guy, the white guy, I'll say, he was the one brought in to audit and review everything.
Real life, it's based on Artie Minson and Sebastian Gunningham, who were the temporary CEOs that kind of took over. I don't know how much Minson and Gunningham were, because Cameron Lautner in the show, the guy we're talking about, was from the beginning is like, I don't believe this shit. I'm gonna review all their finances, figure out, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this. But they kind of made an amalgamation of all of the Benchmark partners. That was the VC firm, the Benchmark. That Benchmark was also the lead one in the Uber show, so they got some stinkers on their hands. But yeah, they just wanted to make like one character to get through it. But
both companies exist and both companies are public.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, that like it's so crazy how there are 3 separate shows to kind of go over all these different types of companies when they're crazy different from each other. Like to compare Theranos and Uber is actually insane, because one is a real thing that you can use, and
comparing Theranos to WeWork, and comparing Theranos to anything's insane. Both Uber and WeWork have products that people like actually enjoyed and it actually worked. It's just I mean, the CEO leadership for both were questionable, but like in WeWork's example was the hyper growth and the like trying to they take on too much and just spending aggressively, and Uber was just like the
Mhm.
toxicity of the workplace and also trying to expand super fast, but they were able to because like foreign countries and other countries like wanted Uber or like they were able to get in there eventually. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's just it's like ego versus like actually it's delusion on all sides,
I
but
know it's definitely a lot of delusion, and
yeah.
we'll get into it with the other characters too. But so the more interesting made up character is Alicia Kennedy. So that's Rebecca Newman's like good friend that in the show she founded a juice company, and then they bring her over as
Yep.
chief brand officer. I said chief operating officer earlier. I meant chief
Fun
brand
fact,
officer. Go ahead.
fun fact, which that school they went to,
Yeah.
that school is also shot in the HBO show with I forget her name. Oh shit. Not Kate Blanchett, Nicole Kidman about her husband being a murderer, which is also 2 blocks away from my brother and his wife used to live in the Upper East
Wait, is
Side
it
in
Big
New York
Little
City.
Lies? I don't even know.
No, it's I
Is it
forget what it's called. I can look it up, but it's with
okay?
the rom com guy whose name is Hugh something, the British dude.
Mm.
Matt
Oh,
Jackman.
House?
Hugh
House?
House? No, huh?
No,
Not
not
House.
his name, but the guy
Not
from
Hugh
House.
Laurie. Not Hugh Laurie. Oh,
Hugh Grant.
fucking
Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of Hughes apparently that are not from
Oh,
America. But yeah,
wait. So that's fun.
that's a real
This
school.
show actually was the show actually was shot in New York, which is kind of
Yeah.
cool. I don't but the real person that she's based off of, Alicia Kennedy, played by America Ferrera, is Julie Rice, who was the founder of Soul Cycle. And they had the
Oh,
same issue. The chief brand officer, they had some kind of tensions. I don't know if it was as much like in the show. It's this dramatic thing where the Kennedy character is pissed because of all the partying and Rebecca's being a total asswipe and trying to
yeah.
like take over everything. Remember, she tries to change the corporate brand like from elevating the world's consciousness to like we're a shared working space. Um,
Yeah.
and that sort of, and that's
which
actually
which
something
probably would have been a
really
good idea, but
it was such a good idea. And that's honestly probably the thing that Scott Galloway talks about this a lot on his podcast and a couple of his books is like when he's investing, one of the things he looks for is a company's mission statement in what he calls yoga babble. So he's actually like
oh
charted if a company has what he defines as yoga babble as their mission statement, their stock after an IPO usually goes way down. But if they say like actually what they do, their stock goes way up. And it's
yeah.
actually really interesting to think about. He talked about, I think it's Casper. Casper
Okay.
mattresses mission
Yeah.
statement is like changing the world through healing and properties of nirvana and shit like that, even though they're just a mattress company. And
When I was almost gonna move in with our friend Sabrara, we laid on a cat. There was a Casper mattress store in the Oculus in the city. We laid in there. I was like, "This is a nice bed." Like, how much does it cost? There's a shit ton of money. Like, oh, it comes in this box. We're like, what? Like, no. But that's interesting because I just made this connection. I wonder. I don't know if it's intentional or if it's true, but like Rebecca Newman, when you get introduced to her in the
Mhm.
show, she's like a
Yoga
yoga
teacher.
apprentice, not even a teacher. She's like
Yeah.
gives all of her money to a guru, like a pimp. Um, yeah, I wonder if that's I don't know. That could be just a film theory stretch. But yeah, that's interesting.
No, yeah, and it's funny because you have the elevate the world's consciousness as a shared working space. Their stock is in the toilet. And then you have Apple's mission statement, which is to bring the best personal computing products and support to students, educators, designers, scientists, engineers, business persons, consumers. That's it.
Yeah.
Like it's just, give computers to people. And they're worth what, $3 trillion? So yeah, it was pretty funny that they really honed in on that and how important it was to the real life Rebecca Newman and Adam Newman to have this crazy yoga babble crap as their
Well,
mission
because they
statement.
didn't know what they were talking about.
Exactly, and they had to pitch
It's
something that exists and isn't that innovative
it's like
to
they
investors.
succeeded in their goal. Like their idea is good and it already exists, and they were doing it better. One thing on the show that I really liked compared to um the documentary or like some other stuff. I'm
Mhm.
sorry to cut you off with your fact and fiction stuff, but like it was like the meeting of like the 6 families. Like whenever I see a group of
Oh
a couple
yeah,
meet together,
yeah,
and then how
yeah,
like Adam like just pushed them off. I'm like, that definitely happened in real life. Like I definitely thought he was better than all those dudes. And they're like, we just sell working spaces. Like all those
yeah.
guys are suctional and probably millionaires, and they get it. And like we're here to work together and share best practices, which is like what companies do. And Adam was like, "Fuck you guys! I'm here to like take over all of you." And tries to buy one of them. It's just like I thought that was actually
Yeah,
really
and then he says, "I'm gonna
interesting.
destroy you." It's like very
Yeah,
similar to the Travis Kalanick and
yeah,
Lyft. But
yeah, oh
dude,
yeah.
you brought up something great, and I know we're getting close to the end here, but I want to point out I have another podcast on here with our friend Paula on working from home, and we get into this WeWork, and she made a really good point that I think the show doesn't make as clear as to why this business just doesn't make any sense. Is like if you own, a ton of space in Manhattan or an amazing market, renting it out to a shared working space for them to try and find people is insane. Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
not going to work. It doesn't make sense. You don't want to rent to someone like that. And they do make that point in the show, which I'll give credit for. And Adam Newman had to double lease lengths. He had signed 10-year leases or 20-year leases. He had to double his price per square
Yeah,
foot to rent it
yeah,
out. And it's even crazier when you find out that he was also owning some of these lands, so he was making money on them.
dude.
And now
Like
SoftBank is stuck with all these incredible contracts on
what's
property.
what's crazy to add to the point, like what I made earlier about like that employee that wanted to quit and he doubled his salary or whatever in front of other
Mhm.
people that are probably making less. Was the like that there's a scene about them growing, like trying to grow and get into these cities. He's like, do whatever you can to
Yep.
obtain this property. And they're like, all right, whatever. And all these landlords, I wonder how much like the landlords made off of WeWork during that time, like just from like getting them locked into these contracts, which seems like it
Oh,
was ended
so
up
much
selling to
money.
Adam Newman. But like that's insane. That's really interesting.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's completely ridiculous, and that just kind of shows that there really wasn't much there at the end of the day. And then there are other business ideas. We Live and We Learn. I mean, We Live is one of the only other main things they kind of left out of the show.
Yeah.
Along with apparently Adam Newman didn't actually love the song Roar by Katy Perry. He liked Juicy by the
Yeah,
Notorious
yeah, yeah,
B.I.G.
yep, 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 yep. Dude, I'm sorry, but in the documentary, they're like, "Oh yeah, there's a scene. You should watch it if you haven't seen it. It's really good." There's a moment where it's like talking about We Live and like the people that live there, like not working there, live there. Like they knew when investors were coming around,
Yeah,
and they would be like, "All right." It's like go in the communal spots, hang out, and they would
yeah.
blare "Juicy" by Big by Gee,
I wonder why
like
they
act like you're
changed
having a
it.
good time.
I guess they wanted to get royalties and pay Katy Perry a bunch of money. Maybe Apple has
I think it's just more cringe. That's why they chose it because
Yeah.
it is like in the show, it is kind of funny that it's Roar. You know what I mean? It's not like Big Papa, like Juicy, like it's a little different. Like I'm got the eye of that. It's like a little more self fulfilling. Like I'm the best. Like I got to go for it. And also the Harlem Shake thing. I don't know if that's real or
Oh, that
not,
was so weird. Because
but
in the show, it's already like years like the Harlem Shake was a thing in like 2012.
dude, I did the
So
Harlem Shake in the company.
yeah, so the show starts off or at least the company starts off in 2014, 2015. It's already
Oh, dude.
way too long after the Harlem Shake to do it.
Before we wrap up, though, we need to talk about the WeWork camp, the summer camp part,
Yeah, let's do it.
because
That's a whole
because
episode.
that's a whole episode, and I think my only critique of that episode is they focused on like Rebecca Newman and her like father,
Mhm.
like in that. I'm like, should have done more employee viewpoints on like what they were doing because I've been in situations with other employees on the company dime, unlimited alcohol, just partying your
Mhm.
ass off, having a great time, but also like it's so stupid. It's like
Oh
it's
yeah,
like
I
all the
can't.
money they wasted to do that. It's like insane.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
I too think that stuff is pretty ridiculous and has no place in like a functioning, healthy corporate environment. But I did read that whole, I don't know, where the women start boycotting Rebecca and she has to go
Yeah.
have like a session with them in a tent. That didn't actually happen, although I'm sure people told her that they didn't love it. Um, And
Well,
there's they don't really show any growth out of Anne Hathaway's character after, so it makes sense. But it was
well,
a
like
good way to kind of show the voices of the women.
yeah, and the thing is, I think they do like I think that's a good scene, and I think it's when you tell these stories like this happens. Like I don't know how long this. It's over years, right? They had like 4 WeWork camps before they got shut down, so they can't just do like a 4-season series like
Yeah,
long,
I know what you
whatever,
mean.
like something. If they got to put it all at once, so they got to find it somewhere. But I think it does show that like I do believe that Rebecca Newman was like aware, and like also Adam was aware of this, but they didn't care because they're
Hmm.
probably sociopaths and actually can't relate to people. Um, like just so I thought that was good. I thought that needed to be said because that was actually like a big thing that like happened. Like we work and also like companies in general. Like also like when this came out, just Me Too and all that stuff. Like you can't just like throw that under the rug. You got to have a scene. You
Hmm.
got to do it. Um, but like I'm sure that she's had one-on-one conversations with people. Like she was in the office probably like quite a bit, and yeah, I don't know. It's insane.
Yeah, it's insane that it didn't have more of an impact on her or make any changes in the company for the
Yeah.
most part.
It's also like crazy that like if you think about it, like from a show perspective, like in reality, that conversation probably would have happened with the CEO or the HR business partner. It happens with the wife. She wasn't like in the show, she
Yeah,
wasn't the chief branding officer yet, I don't think.
I don't
Like
think so
it's like
either.
third episode or fourth episode. Like so she was just like someone who has no power
Hmm.
that she wanted to speak. But it also shows that she's like one of these people that believes that she deserves like a stage, that she's more important than she actually is. Same with Adam. And it's just like kind of focusing on the two characters and the couple, more so like the company itself.
Well, they do bring it up really well, and I'm sure it's true. But I think this is positioned well in this series because Rebecca was clearly instrumental in like what the company became and how he. I don't think he would have ever gotten where he is without her. And I love how they. I think it's in the opening scene. They say, "Who's that? What does she do?" They say she helps him manifest things. That was her role at the company. She helps Adam
Yeah.
manifest his greatness because he's a supernova.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, man, I as we wrap up, I just want to say, like, 1 or 0. Are you telling someone they should or shouldn't watch this? Is it worth their time?
Yeah, I think they should watch it. Like it's interesting. I say 1. Um it's interesting. It's also not too difficult to watch. So it's like I was watching this show the other day called The Sandman, where I looked at my phone for 30 seconds, and the one of the characters aged 100 years. So it's like not one of those shows that you need to pay attention to the whole time. You can get the gist of it. There's slow points. Like I'm not saying it's the best show, but it's like super interesting. It's like happened recently. I would say I think I enjoyed it a lot because I watched the documentary and I read about We Were before. So it's like hyper focused on the character of Adam Newman and Rebecca Newman, which was like whether it's real or not, but it's like you already have an understanding of who this person is and where they come from. So it's a little different. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was great.
I'm gonna
How about
go
you?
sat. I think I'm gonna go in the other direction. I think I would say this is not something I'd recommend. I mean, Anne Hathaway's performance is great in it. That part is probably worthwhile, but I didn't like gain anything out of it, and it didn't leave an impression on me. And I could immediately think about how when I watched the Theranos one, even though I've seen a documentary on Theranos, I felt more sympathetic towards Elizabeth Holmes than I did before. Like before, I was like, "Oh, she's just a crazy woman." But when I watched the show, it kind of showed me things in a different perspective. I still think what they did is
So
wrong.
that's
Go ahead.
interesting. That's interesting. I'm sorry.
But I
I
felt
cut
like
you off.
no, it's all good if you have a question. But I felt like with this, I didn't get any additional insight into Rebecca and Adam. They kind of just portrayed them as I would gather from reading an article about them. However, I didn't watch a documentary on them. This is the only one of the 3 where I've just done a little bit of homework on my own. I read a
Mm-hmm.
book on Uber and I watched a documentary on Theranos, but I don't actually have as much resource or information in my brain on WeWork. Um, but I just don't know if it's really you're going to get as much out of it as you might just watching a documentary.
Well, my pitch would be is actually the documentary is I would recommend that. If you're doing a
Okay.
scale of 1 to 2, I would do a 10. It is fantastic. It's really well done. It's under 2 hours. Hits all the notes. But like I think the show does an interesting, at least for me, was it like the WeCrashed or whatever was interesting enough because it like really hit your head against the wall of these two characters that are
Mhm.
unlikable that you don't like. But you're like, there's moments where I'm like kind of rooting for them, even though I know the ending and they're like wrong. And it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I see some sympathy there, even though they're fucking rich and
Yeah,
sociopaths.
that's the thing.
I
Like
like that shit
nothing
though.
nothing really bad ever happens to them as far as I'm concerned. They kind of just have like everything they've ever wanted. I mean, they fight a little, but it doesn't really detract from their lives in any way, like being a part of this company. And people think they're a joke, but with the way they act, they're certainly comfortable with people thinking they're
Yeah.
weird. I mean, Adam Newman doesn't wear shoes anywhere and he smokes a shit ton
Well,
of weed.
that's really like going like that's interesting. Like the two, like out of the show, I don't think Jared Leto or Adam Newman has any character development or like he's not deep. He's very surface level, and I
Mhm.
think Rebecca Newman is her character is pretty deep because they actually do more background on her, and I think Anne Hathaway's a better actor in
Yeah. No,
general. So like the storyline with her father is something that like you don't really know about, and it's like interesting, but like it gives her motive on like what she's trying to do. Like she's trying to find her purpose, but she's also misguided and delusional. So it's like you meet her, she's a yoga instructor living in a one bedroom apartment in New York City, which I know costs $2,000 at least, and she doesn't make
yeah.
any money. So it's like, like
No, you're definitely summarizing it super well. Rebecca Newman is a very dedicated, focused person on the outside who's so conflicted on the inside with all the
yeah.
different things she wants to do and her legacy and her impression on people, and these insecurities. She thinks she's shielding them so much by manifesting them into I'm going to build a company, I'm going to
Mhm.
educate people. She changes what her mind on what she wants to do every 5 minutes, but then
By the
acts
people
like it's what
around
she's
her.
always yeah. But then
That's
she
what it
acts
is.
like it's what she's
Yeah.
always wanted and she's always been about. Like they do that a few times when people ask her like, "Oh, what about acting?" She's like, "Well, I always knew acting was really
Mhm.
just this." And it's
Even
pretty
though she
cool.
was a diehard, like, wanted to be an actress. Like, that
Yeah.
was a big point in the show and life,
Yeah.
and fun fact, she did do a movie with Rosario Dawson that I think they produced, like, WeWork produced, so
Oh, really?
apparently it's called, like, Heavy Rain or Hard Rain or something, like, it's apparently terrible, and she's terrible in it. But, yeah.
Well, there's another recommendation for something to check out. But anything else to add to the pod as we wrap up here, Tyler?
No, I would just say, for a show that I knew everything that was happening, like, I knew the story, I thought it was pretty good. Maybe I love hate watching things, but I didn't dislike Jared Leto as much as I thought. I thought he was crazy, but also Adam Newman is a character. I would check it out. Yeah, but I do think out of the three, this is my least favorite. Um, and like kind of it drags the most out of the
Yeah,
three.
I'm kind
Yeah.
of with you. And for a show that I checked out purely because Scott Galloway was a character on it, I will say if you are looking for a lot of Scott Galloway, there's not enough. There's not enough Scott in this show. I wanted much more of him. If they cut his scenes, release the Galloway cut, I'll start that hashtag on Twitter, and hopefully we'll see that soon. But thank you everyone for joining. I think Tyler will be back here soon for us to talk about Super Pump next. Does that sound good to you, Ty?
Yeah, Super Pump or Theranos, either one, man.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again for joining Los Angeles today. Take care, everybody. Talk to you soon.